Bohemian Grove, an annual meeting place for members of the Bohemian Club, elites from the world of politics, business, and entertainment.
But what are they there for? So what is this secretive meetup that happens at Bohemian Grove, an exclusive 2,700-acre campground tucked away in the redwood forests of Northern California? Well, every summer this place becomes the meeting ground for some of the most powerful men in the world. Politicians, business leaders, artists, and who knows who else. They gather here for a few weeks of relaxation, networking, and some rather unusual rituals. As for what these rituals entail and what the group discusses, well, these are just a couple of the questions people have about these annual meetups. What happens at Bohemian Grove stays at Bohemian Grove, and this has led to a lot of rumors and conspiracy theories. But before we get into all that, let's start peeling back the layers and explore some of the history behind it.
The Bohemian Club was founded in 1872. 21 years later, in 1893, the Grove, located in Sonoma County, California, became the regular meeting place of the club members. Now, prior to that, on June 29th of 1878, the organization held their first summer camp-style meeting at the Redwoods in Marin County, California, present-day Samuel P. Taylor State Park. Of course, I use the word meeting quite loosely, considering the fact that, according to members of the Grove, the campground was more of a place to hang out and let off steam than actually partake in any kind of political shop talk. In 1893, the club began renting their current location, the Bohemian Grove, and in 1899 they purchased the lands, and in the following years the lands surrounding the Grove were purchased as well by various members of the organization, members who James will get into now.
So who are some of the prominent attendees at Bohemian Grove? Well, it's pretty much a who's who of the elite. First up, we have US presidents. Many of them have been members or guests at Bohemian Grove. Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan are two of the most notable. Nixon even mentioned the place in some of his tapes, and Reagan is known to have attended before he even became president. There are tons of other politicians outside of presidents as well. A lot of high-ranking officials have made appearances. People like Henry Kissinger, who served as Secretary of State. Then there's the business moguls, heads of major corporations and banks, like David Rockefeller, for example. There are also plenty of artists, writers, and musicians. Mark Twain, the famous author, was an early member. Arnold Schwarzenegger has attended, Clint Eastwood, some very big names, as well as ones you've probably never heard of. And those are the names who I think are really involved in stuff. The bigwigs who fly under the radar, you know?
Now, I know I said that the members of the Bohemian Club gathering at the Grove tend to avoid shop talk, which is true, generally. But in September of 1942, in the midst of the Second World War, the influential and incredibly intelligent members of the club just couldn't help themselves from discussing what could possibly be done to end the war and simultaneously strengthen America's defenses. That meeting, attended by Ernest Lawrence, J. Robert Oppenheimer, the presidents of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, along with representatives of Standard Oil and General Electric, as well as various military officials, is what ultimately led to the Manhattan Project, which ultimately ended with two nuclear bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man, being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, causing irreparable damages to Japanese forces and land.
The Bohemian Club has been involved in some legal trouble over the years. They were first charged in 1978 for discrimination. See, I mentioned who some of the big names in Bohemian Grove were. Notice how none of them are women. That's because it's a no girls allowed club. Back in 1978, the club was hit with a discrimination charge by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. The problem? Well, they refused to hire female employees. In January of '81, an administrative law judge backed the club's practices. The judge noted that the club members often urinate openly without any proper facilities and argued that having women around would change the men's behavior. They might have to build washrooms in there or something. That's a really weird argument to make. But this decision was overruled, and in October of 1981, the club was ordered to start hiring women. The Bohemian Club wasn't happy with this ruling and took the matter to the California Superior Court. The court sided with the club, saying that being male was a legitimate job requirement, but then it turned out that the trial judge had previously participated in club activities. The Fair Employment and Housing Commission didn't give up and appealed to the California California Court of Appeal. This time the court ruled against Bohemian Club, stating that their private status didn't exempt them from laws that apply to all employers in California. The club tried to take the case to the Supreme Court of California, but in 1987 the court refused to review it. So they were finally forced to start hiring female employees for their summer events at Bohemian Grove. Although I can't imagine many women would be flocking to apply here. Seems like it would be a very uncomfortable job.
There are two giant wooden statues located on the grounds of the Bohemian Grove. One is a giant wooden owl, and the other is a wood carving of Saint John of Nepomuk, who, according to legend, was the confessor of the Bohemian Queen, meaning she confessed her secrets to him. He later died at the hands of another Bohemian monarch after refusing to disclose the secrets that had been shared with him by the Queen. His statue now resides at the Grove as a symbol of the secrecy kept by the members of the Bohemian Club throughout its existence. The owl, on the other hand, represents the wisdom shared among the members. It was constructed in the late 1920s, and since then it has stood at the head of the lake located in the Grove and has served as the backdrop of the yearly Cremation of Care ceremony, which I will tell you about after this.
The Bohemian Club has also come under fire for logging. Outside the main camp area, but still on the land owned by the club, logging has been going on since 1984. From then until 2007, around 11 million board feet of lumber was removed from the redwood and Douglas fir forests. Edward Tunheim, the club's forester, resigned in 2006 because the club was pressuring him to increase logging. He was worried that too much logging would lead to more brushy undergrowth, which could increase the risk of fires. In 2007, the Bohemian Club applied for a non-industrial logging permit. The permit would let them gradually increase their logging from 800,000 board feet per year to 1.7 million board feet over 50 years. The club argued that more logging was necessary to prevent fires, but some experts, like Philip Rundle, a professor of biology at the University of California, wasn't buying this explanation, saying that redwoods aren't very flammable and that, quote, "this is clearly a logging project, not a project to reduce fire hazard." The club tried to meet permit requirements by offering 163 acres to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for conservation and setting aside another 57 acres as non-loggable, but the club's total timberland was still too large for this permit. In 2011, a judge rejected the club's logging plan after a lawsuit by the Sierra Club and the Bohemian Redwood Rescue Club. The judge demanded a new plan with different logging rates. So, ever since, the club hasn't been able to log on any of its property.
The Cremation of Care ceremony first took place in 1881. It was thought up by James F. Bowman, an American journalist, poet, and co-founder of the Bohemian Club, along with George T. Bromley, an honorary member of the Grove. Originally, the ceremony was set up as some kind of elaborate joke, a dramatic performance during which Bromley played a high priest who cremated the spirit of care to represent letting go. But eventually the ceremony became a ritual at the Grove, and in 1931 it began taking place annually on the very first day of the retreat to represent an exorcising of the demon in order to ensure the success of the next 2 weeks. I mean, does it sound super cultish and somewhat satanic? Yes, kind of. Could it just be a bunch of grown men messing around? Yes, for sure, but there could also be something more to it.
There could be blackmail going on at Bohemian Grove. Let me explain. So, there's this very interesting idea that the powerful or famous and influential people who are invited to Bohemian Grove might be encouraged or tricked into doing things that they wouldn't want the public to know about. Scandalous things like participating in strange rituals, using illicit substances. Just the tip of the iceberg here. Your imaginations are going to go in all kinds of directions that I just cannot and will not explore right now. Point is, though, having dirt on politicians and famous folks gives you some leverage. If a powerful person steps out of line or doesn't follow certain agendas that the club wants to push, the threat of exposing these secrets could, in theory, be used to keep them in check. Just my little invitation out right now to any famous person watching. I'm going to be starting my own club. I don't know what it's called yet, but we'll post a link below.
Seeing as the Bohemian Club is in fact a secret society comprised of many of America's richest and most influential individuals, it would only make sense to assume that it is entirely possible that these annual 2-week camps are actually 2-week meetings about how these individuals can one day gain full control over the world. I mean, we've got presidents, politicians, authors, celebrities, business tycoons, big oil, and big electricity. If these guys wanted, they could totally screw us over, and perhaps they already are. Slowly, so we don't have time to revolt until it's far too late. I mean, have you seen the price of gas lately? Or the price of a 1-bedroom apartment? Or better yet, the price of a no-bedroom apartment? 0.5 mil is honestly criminal. Perhaps we have the Grove to thank for having to choose between paying student loans or buying a house, and for the rising prices of basic needs like food and water. I mean, if this was the club's plan all along, they're doing a pretty good job at keeping us busy scrounging for money while they sit back on their fancy chairs made of gold or whatever and nonchalantly plan how they are going to create a one-world government that makes the rich richer, the poor poorer, and replaces the working force with robots so they don't have to pay anyone. And maybe they're using this cremation of care to summon the devil to help them. I'm just saying, stay safe out there.
Well, we hope you've learned something here today about Bohemian Grove. What do you think's going on in there? Your comments down below.
Yeah.
See you in the next one.
Cheers.
Thanks.